Yes, I can testify to the powerful healing that occurs. I went on a Hope Project retreat with Allison and Dr. Lucy, and um, the way you explained that was totally accurate. It was absolutely one of the most profound experiences in my life. So thank you for that. And I'm excited to have that option for people in Massachusetts. So I want to kick it over to Tamar, who will tell us a little bit about how that could look in Massachusetts.
Sure, thank you. So I'm Tamar Todd. I'm an attorney, and I was involved in the drafting of the measure for Massachusetts, as well as for Colorado and some of the other states. And I don't want to, Jamie in the beginning hit on some of the specifics about what the initiative does. And I'll also note that in the chat, there's a link to the Attorney General summary that you can go to and read sort of all the finer details of it specifically. So I don't want to go through all of that because it would take too much time, but I want to make three sort of general points about the overall design and structure and language of the initiative and what it's aiming to do and how it will work. The first important point is that there's certain elements of the ballot question that are very strict in terms of how the program must be implemented and designed. On the base level, it's a ballot initiative. So the voters are going to be telling the state, you have to create this program, and it has to create meaningful access to these substances. It has to be offered under the care of a trained and licensed facilitator to folks who are 21 years older who can benefit from them. And then, as Jamie also mentioned, it's very strict that in terms of this regulated program, these substances can only happen within this program and be used under the supervision of one of these trained and licensed facilitators and must be at an approved location. So it's not the type of thing, as I mentioned with cannabis, where you buy it and you take it home and then you use it. This is supervised, facilitated use by someone who's trained and does not allow for those retail sales. And then in addition to those strict requirements, there's a number of areas where rules must be promulgated and enforced that are designed around creating guardrails and safety for the participants in this program. There has to be a comprehensive safety screening to make sure participants know what's going to happen, that this is suitable for them. It's not for everybody, and there may be reasons why someone does not want to undertake it. So there has to be comprehensive screening. The person has to give informed consent, which means they're informed about what's going to happen and whether it's right for them, and they consent to it. The facilitator has to be trained for the participant who they're working with, and there will be tiers to ensure that the facilitator has appropriate level of training. There have to be measures to prevent any sort of abuse from the facilitator, which is one of the problems with an unregulated environment, is that you can't guard against that and prevent it. The substances have to be tested and safe and labeled. And then finally, there's a requirement that information be collected and data be collected so that we can understand and evaluate what's happening with the program and improve it as it goes along and maximize the benefits and restrict any potential negatives. The second point I want to make is that while it's very strict in those regards, it's also created to be very flexible in terms of how those strict guardrails and safety measures are created. And the reason for that is that we don't know up front and want to codify in law specifically how everything must function. That we want to give to experts to really spend time discussing and looking at the research and developing the best program possible. So it establishes an advisory board that's comprised of a wide range of experts in all sorts of areas, from psychedelic research, science, veterans health, healthcare access, mental health, program evaluation, data collection, product safety, first responders, indigenous uses. All these folks will come together and they will help direct how these rules are promulgated that will be required to establish these guardrails. And in that vein, the initiative establishes a long implementation timeline. So it's not going to pass and then in January 2025, everything's up and running and you can access it. It's going to be a process of almost 2 years with this advisory committee meeting, making recommendations, promulgating rules, adopting the rules. And we won't see applications and licensure come out until September of 2026. And so it's going to be a process. And then the final third point I want to make is that there's an advantage to not being the very first state to go out front. Massachusetts can look at what's happened in Oregon and in Colorado, and we did that in the crafting of it, and tried to make a number of improvements on the policy. To point out a couple of those, one is around better data collection and analysis of outcomes. So we're building that in from the very beginning. So we start collecting information from the very first day, and can really evaluate and understand the program. And we also tried to create some better pathways for access for some particularly vulnerable groups, like people at the end of life and also veterans, to affirmatively ensure that there were going to be access to services in existing healthcare facilities, in group settings, in places where some of these vulnerable groups will need to access and feel comfortable accessing it. So we tried to incorporate some of those, of what we've learned so far. And with as I mentioned, the flexibility built in, we'll be able to incorporate more about what we learn in Massachusetts and as we see Colorado roll out. So I'll stop there and turn it back over to Jamie. And I think hopefully we have some time for some questions or follow-up comments.
Yeah,